Okay, in this little mini series we're going to look at developing a skill which is the ring muscle up. This is a beautiful skill that combines strength, mobility, stability, and it's also something that is very relevant to you as a climber because it's a completely functional movement and very relevant to what we do when we're in the mountains, having to pull ourselves up over a ledge. I prefer doing this on the rings because it adds that stability element, and it's also a better place to start because doing a bar muscle up is much more challenging than doing a ring muscle up if you know the technique. We're going to be using wooden rings, by the way, because they're much easier. It gives you better grip. These are the rings that they use in gymnastics. Now, firstly, there's a couple of prerequisites that you need to accomplish before you start working on the ring muscle up. So I want you to try these out and see if you can hit these numbers first. Now, most of these prerequisites require you to be able to demonstrate and use false grip. Now, false grip is a technique that gymnasts use to be able to get up on top of the rings, and it's all about how you actually grasp the ring. We want to be placing the ring over this line between our thumb and the middle of the wrist, and if you're doing this properly, at least initially, you'll start to develop blisters here, and it does require you to toughen up that area of the skin over time. You will get blisters at first, but over time you'll build up a little bit more resistance there. And a great way to train the false grip and build up strength is by holding your false grip and just simply hanging with the weight of your body. It's going to help you build up strength and mobility holding that position. So that false grip is one of the most important things. We want the ring going between two meaty parts of your palm there. We want the ring going straight over that. That's going to enable us to give us leverage to push up. The first prerequisite is a ring row done in false grip, and you need to be able to perform 10 reps of the ring row using false grip, meaning that you can pull the rings all the way into your chest so your thumbs reach your armpits, and then slowly lower down until you can lock out your elbows in the row. If you can do 10, we can move on to the second prerequisite. The second prerequisite is a false grip dip, whereby we're utilizing the false grip, locking out the elbows, coming all the way up on top of the rings, and then slowly lowering down. So we need the chest and the bicep strength to be able to come down into this low position with the elbows tucked behind you, with the thumbs right up into the armpits, and then pressing back up to elbow lockout. And a good practice for gymnasts is to externally rotate the fists so that we have the inside of the wrist tucked in nice and close to our body, and that helps us keep that strong lockout position. When you're working on the dip, remember we want to build mobility as well. So think about trying to always bring your thumbs into your armpits and get as low in the dip as possible. Over time, as you build up more mobility to be able to get into that lower position, you'll get closer and closer to be able to transition into the muscle up. You need to be able to do 5 reps of the false grip dip before moving on to the third. The third prerequisite is the ring chin up done in false grip. You want to be able to perform 5 reps of pulling the rings right up to your chest and then lowering down until we get full lockout of the elbows. Once you can do 5 reps of that, then we can tick that box and we can move on to the next one. So they're the strength prerequisites. Then we also have the stability prerequisite. The stability prerequisite is being able to hold yourself in a tuck hold up on top of the rings. Really helps if you pull your fists close to your legs. You want to roll the shoulders back and down and really lock the elbows out and tense everything in your body. Tense your core, tense your glutes, tense your abs, tense your chest, and you should be able to hold yourself quite stable there on top of the rings. For our stability element, doing the tuck hold, again we want to be on top of the rings using false grip, and we want to be able to hold for 30 seconds in this position with full elbow lockout and wrists holding you in false grip. 30 seconds holding this position, tighten everything, breathe. We want that rounded shoulders position, shoulders locked in, and a really nice, tight, strong, straight body. And at first, when you're working on this with the tuck hold, you can just have your tippy toes on the ground just for a little bit of extra stability and balance, and to take a tiny little bit of your body weight off the rings and onto the ground just to help you build up to this. Without that stability element, we don't have enough stability in the shoulder to be able to protect the shoulder joint, so it's really important that you're able to hold that stability on top of the rings for at least 30 seconds before you start working on the muscle up. The final component is a mobility component, and that comes down to false grip as well. And we need a 90-degree angle under load safely in the wrist. And the way that we do that is doing wrist roll-ups, whereby we're keeping that tight fist, we're rolling onto the back of the fist, we have elbow lockout on our knees, and we're rolling back up into that top position, keeping the elbow locked out the whole time, and moving towards 90 degrees with your wrist like this. So if you don't have the wrist mobility, that's also something we need to work on. If you have all of those 5 prerequisites, then theoretically you should be able to do a muscle up, and then it's just coming down to technique. So let's have a look at the technique involved in a muscle up. We're going to pull into the chin up first, then we're going to bring the thumbs to the armpits. So you imagine kind of like ripping your shirt off, like Hulk, ripping the shirt apart, thumbs into armpits, and then simultaneously pressing your chest through the rings so the rings end up kind of behind you around your ribs. From here, it's a strength move of pressing so the bicep and the chest gets involved all the way until we lock out the elbows. That's where that stability element comes in, where we're holding that top position, and then we simply reverse it. So back into the bottom of the dip, pulling the rings around into the top of the chin up, and then slowly lowering down, externally rotating the elbows into full lockout if possible. So keeping those tips in mind with your technique, you can start to work on this with your feet on the ground so you don't have so much load on your muscles. And we really want you to work through those motor skills of pull, ripping your shirt off like Hulk, thumbs to armpits, chest forward, push, and then reversing it. Thumbs back to armpits, rings back round to the front, and then the lowering down to elbow lockout. All the while maintaining the false grip on top of the rings, because if you lose that and you come back into a regular grip, then it can be hard to get back to. So that is an overview of how to develop your first muscle up. Make sure you hit the prerequisites first, both in the strength, stability, and mobility, and then just start working on the technique with your feet on the floor. As you get stronger and stronger, you can transition less from that horizontal position with your legs on the floor into more vertical, then into having the rings set up so that you need to kind of jump up into your first muscle up. And then over time, you want to minimize that jump as much as possible so that you can perform a full muscle up, ideally with as much control as possible and minimal kipping. From then on, it's about dialing in the technique and building the strength and really grooving that movement pattern of the transition from the concentric phase up to the top and then the lowering eccentric phase on the way down. Film yourself, have a look at your technique. Feel free to send me that video. I would love to see your technique. I can give you some tips to help you improve. Grab your wooden rings, get out into the park or get into the gym and start working on your first ring muscle up. So your routine for building up the prerequisites to the muscle up starts like this. We begin with 3 sets of 10 reps with our wrist mobility drill. Then we move on to 3 sets of 30 seconds with the straight body tuck hold at the top of the rings. Then we get into 3 sets of 10 with the false grip row, making sure that we have the ring over the middle of the palm between those 2 nice meaty parts of the palm. Then we get into 3 sets of 5 with the false grip chin up. Again, 3 minutes rest between each set. And then finally, we get into the last exercise with 3 sets of 5 of the dip on rings, making sure we're coming as deep as possible into that bottom position and getting elbow lockout at the top position. And throughout the time that you're doing this routine, you can just practice on that technique, doing a couple of reps here and there to help start to groove that movement pattern a little further. And when you're feeling strong after doing this routine for a couple of weeks, then you can really start practicing and giving your full attention and force into the muscle up to try and get your first one. Now at the beginning, you're going to need to use a little bit more momentum. You're going to be relying more on strength until you develop the technique. So at the start, you can use a little bit of momentum. For me, when I'm working on muscle ups, I'm really focusing on doing the slowest muscle up I possibly can, 30 seconds on the way down, 30 seconds on the way up. And that's the way that I maintain my strength and mobility and stability in this movement. But that takes a long time to work towards. So initially, when you're working on the technique and the strength, you can use a little bit of kipping, but not too much. Over time, as you dial this in, you'll find that you'll be able to use less momentum and more strength and more technique to be able to get the job done. My technique isn't exactly perfect at the moment. That little fish kind of action that's happening there is not ideal. But for me, if I'm able to maintain 3 muscle ups without any problem, I'm fine with that. So I think working on the muscle up can be one of those really gratifying moves. It does take a lot of time and practice, but you have everything here that you need, I think, to be able to go and attack this and start implementing it. I would say working on this like 3 days a week would be great. I think for guys especially, just having these fundamental basic movements of dip and pull and combining those together to get the muscle up is a great kind of base foundation for the upper body. If you're not quite there yet and you feel like you need to work on the basics a little bit more, then I would recommend checking out my Elements program. You can see the link in the description, as well as a full breakdown of this routine, so you can just copy and paste it and put it wherever you like. I will also send this out on my email list, and if you're not on that, you'll find that in a link in the description. That's about all for this one. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you on the summit.